2.5 years ago, General Motors stock price was nearly double what it is today. Investors are fleeing. Warren Buffett, after holding General Motors stock for more than 10 years, has dumped every single cent of his investment. Berkshire Hathaway have run away from General Motors in a way that they've probably never done before with any other company that they've invested in. This is the reason why. The second most important car market in the world for General Motors is China. It's still China. It has been China for more than a decade. But General Motors' collapse in China is staggering. And it's even worse than the title of this video appears to make it out. Now, General Motors made more than $2 billion in profit in 2018. However, in 2023, that figure fell to $440 million. Those numbers are even worse than they appear though, because if you include inflation, it's really more like falling from 2 billion to maybe 350 million. So General Motors' collapse in China is not just staggering in the size of the collapse, but it's also scary. It's really scary because that 440 million that General Motors just made last year is likely to evaporate within the next 2 years. Meaning, General Motors is just an American car company. And if they don't make it in North America, then they could be finished. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching the Electric Viking. Great to see you. General Motors used to be one of the biggest car makers in China. In fact, a couple of years ago, they were actually the second biggest automaker in China. They have sold millions of cars there. But GM sales have continued to collapse. In fact, they're in free fall. The Detroit automaker grew rapidly in its first 2 decades, first 20 years in China via the Buick, Cadillac, and Chevrolet brands, while earning more than $2 billion a year as recently as 2018. But last year, General Motors made only $440 million in China, a continued decline. In fact, last year was a decline of 34% versus the coronavirus pandemic year of 2022. General Motors expects to revert to a loss in China this quarter as it adjusts production and inventory. GM has thousands of cars in China that no one wants to buy. And I mean that very literally. General Motors makes very few electric cars in China. Most consumers now want an EV. Most consumers don't want a General Motors EV. They don't believe General Motors have the technology to produce compelling EVs. Now that may or may not be true, but the point is here. What is true is what the consumers think, what they believe. When consumers hear this, they think maybe General Motors won't even be around in China within a couple of years. Their sales are falling. They just made a loss. They've gone from making $2 billion a year, year after year, being one of the biggest automakers in the country, and their sales are collapsing. They're now making a loss. Will they just run away from China like Mitsubishi and Jeep have just done within the past 18 months? Good chance they will. General Motors' market share in China topped 14% of the entire country, biggest auto market in the world in 2017, but has fallen to 8%. And its Chinese sales volumes in 2023 dropped below those in the United States for the first time since 2009. Now you can see how important it is, right? Since 2009, General Motors has been selling more cars every year in China than it has in America. I mean, most people don't know, most Americans are not aware of that. So this is a huge loss. GM sales in China are down 50% from their 2017 peak, said Michael Dunn, former president of General Motors Indonesia and CEO of consulting firm Dunn Insights. Chevy and Buick no longer mean anything to Chinese consumers. Cadillac is the last line of defense. For General Motors in China, it's up or out. I think it's most likely going to be out. Part of GM's problem is that it's catching up in electric vehicle development. What do I mean by that? Is General Motors themselves catching up with their electric vehicle development? Well, no, not at all. Bloomberg NEF forecasts sales of EVs to reach 38% in China's auto market this year. But BYD, he believes they're going to be over 50%. Many experts in China say the number will be over 50% by the end of this year. That would mean General Motors would be missing out on that massive slice of the market. They make very few electric cars. Cadillac just started building the Lyriq EV in November. It's going to start building the smaller Optic and 3-row Vistique EVs later this year. But you know what it's like with General Motors? Promises, promises, promises. Not much ever really happens when it comes to EVs. Delays, 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 and they just put them off forever. Buick has had inexpensive electric models in the market, but just expanded its lineup with the Electra E5 crossover and the Electra E4 Coupe EVs. Both went on sale last summer, giving the brand 2 new EVs powered by GM's Ultium battery pack. The company also has a third EV, the compact Velite 6, but like Cadillac derives most of its sales, in fact more than 95% of its sales, from internal combustion. See, consumers, they don't really believe that GM is a new EV technology company. And if they're going to buy an EV, which many millions are, they don't really look at General Motors at all. They don't think, hey, I'll go and check out a Buick EV. They don't even know they exist for the most part. Cadillac is showing signs of improvement, says Automotive News. John Roth, Vice President of Global Cadillac, said in an interview that, things are not so bad. He said the brand started growing in January and it's boosting sales in China again in February, thanks in part to the Lyric. Now, I would be very careful about this statement because if I were the SEC, I'd probably consider banning him from making false statements. I checked EV sales for General Motors in January. They were minuscule. China needs to do well, he said. We've got great plans. I see no reason why we won't see year-over-year growth. Barra said General Motors could still make money from China's mass market with its ownership stake in the joint venture with its SAIC, GM Wuling Automobile Company partnership that it shares with SAIC Motor and Guangxi Auto. Now, this is a tri-partnership. General Motors owns 33%. That partnership builds small, very, very cheap, budget-priced mini electric vehicles that start at around $5,000 US. Now, I reported that the company makes around $20 per vehicle only because of government incentives. Not a lot of profit there. GM has a 44% stake in the joint venture though, which now counts for more than half its China sales. So when you look at GM's EV sales figures in their reporting, you're getting a little bit misled because more than half of its EV sales are, they're not really GM vehicles. General Motors doesn't manufacture them. Its joint venture partners do. And they're very, very cheap budget-priced EVs. There's very, very tiny profit margins, if any. So, what is GM's plan for China? Well, they say they're going to pivot and simply sell luxury vehicles in China. Now, how many Chinese consumers do you think really have the perception that GM's vehicles are luxury? Do they equate them with the likes of, say, Mercedes-Benz or BMW? I'm not so sure, but let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching.